Join two sisters who explore the couples that fandoms adore. We write their stories in the night, in the glow of computer light. Eyes connect, clothing flies. In our head, canon love never dies. Tense looks that leave us pining. In deep forums, we are mining. For this journey, better strap in, because we all know that shit happens.
Welcome to the podcast that explores the couples fans can't stop daydreaming about from the pop culture you love. Because when it comes to your mythical mockumentary TV shows, shit happens.
We're your host. I'm Emily.
And I'm Rachel. She likes nerd culture.
And she likes making podcasts, so we thought we'd join forces to make a podcast about popular online ships.
And we like to kick off every episode by talking about our ship of the week. Bum, 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 bum. Emily, who are you shipping this week?
So I've been sitting on my ship this week. I've been playing this video game.
It's always a video game.
I know. I don't even play that many. I played like 4 last year. Anyway, so I've been into this video game called Dragon Age Veilguard. So I picked it up. I needed to just have a fun time. It's okay. It's a solid game. I had a good time. But what really stuck with me is that there are some reoccurring characters from previous games.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So specifically, his name is Soulless. So he's one of the bad guys. And you have to kind of team together with him. Yeah. To take down the other two.
This is the prime breeding ground for tension.
Exactly. That's it. There's the tension because he's helping you for now. But he's going to screw you over. Your character knows. You, the human being behind it, knows. Everybody knows. And I just kind of create some more interesting chemistry where that is maybe lacking with the actual romanceable characters. So, yeah, I think those bits are better written. The voice acting's great. So there's just kind of something there. And you can't flirt with him. But I just wanted some little heart conversations, some heart dialogue options.
Oh.
So I don't know. He sucks though. I will say that.
Well, did you want the heart or did you want a little chili pepper for spicy?
Maybe. Yeah, it's the spiciness. I like that tension. I don't want them to end up together because like I said, he does suck. He does betray you. But
that's the foundation of every great relationship.
That's it's part of it. It's you kind of see where he's coming from, but also he does. I want to punch him in the face.
That's elementary school crush right there.
I know.
The foundations of all our romantic relationships. I want to pull your pigtail.
And I know I'm not the only one because I've been on Reddit quite a bit about this. So I know there's others out there. And actually, ironically, so in the game before this one, which I have now gone and played.
Oh, wow.
I just kind of he's in it. I wanted to know what his deal was. He's actually one of your companions, your friends. So you could romance him.
Oh.
But I did not.
Did you?
No.
Oh.
Was not feeling it as much. It's before the big reveal. So I think I liked it with that extra spice. Whereas before, he's just lying to you. And I know he's lying to you. So, no, I went with a happier ending.
And that's toxic AF. I feel like video games do that kind of stuff, which that gets my ship of the week because I'm also doing a video game.
Ooh.
Because I'm not consuming a lot of sexy content these days. But we are playing a video game called It Takes Two, or It Takes Two, something like that. It's very popular. Mm-hmm. We're late to the game. I guess normally you would probably want to ship the couple, but they're really annoying. They're just always talking about getting divorced. Obviously you guys want to get divorced really bad, so I'm not going to force the issue. But there's this sexy Spanish book by Dr. Hakim or something, and he's a character. And he's trying to help them kind of reconnect their love interest. And I'm shipping him with the character that I'm playing, which is the man. So there you go. That's my ship of the week. Just because he cares about love. I'm playing the man character. He's a stay-at-home dad. He needs some love. There you go. Put them together. But I am concerned that this book is secretly the villain at the end of the day.
Could be, maybe he's the actual cause of everyone's problems.
Now I got all my horses in the camp of that the book is the bad guy. Even though I think the bad guy is just not appreciating your spouse.
I heard it gets dark. I think I watched a video of like darkest moments in video games, and that's the only reason I had heard of it before.
Well, the squirrel just let them get stung by a bunch of hornets, so I thought it was pretty dark to me. But speaking of dark, today we're going to be talking about something very dark, and that is what we do in the shadows. And who are we talking about today?
It's Nandor the Relentless and Guillermo de la Cruz from What We Do in the Shadows, or as the fans call them, Nandermo.
Nandermo.
Nandermo. That sounds better.
Nandermo. Yeah, like Guillermo.
Guillermo.
Which again, at first time I wrote it down, I was like, Nandermo. That's a weird name. And you know what? We like to talk about and critique the names, but in this case, no notes. I like it. Nandermo.
Nandermo. Yeah, what else could it be?
Gildor.
That sounds like Lord of the Rings.
Gandor. That actually is kind of nice. So these two characters are a part of What We Do in the Shadows, which is a mockumentary following the adventures and, let's be real, the misadventures of a den of Staten Island vampires as they navigate the modern world and attempt to take over North America, starting with their street and half of the adjacent street.
So I watched the first couple seasons. I don't recall them really making it past the adjacent street. I kind of feel like actually taking over North America kind of falls to the wayside.
Yes. I rewatched the pilot, and the big ancient vampire guy comes and he's like, oh, you guys are in Staten Island. Is this the capital of the new world? And they're just like, it's where the boat dropped us off. So these are not very ambitious vampires, despite the fact that Nandor, the Relentless, was once the ruler of El Gondadar, which I guess is a fictional country in the Ottoman Empire. He was a general warlord type character who was very fond of his horse.
He's kind of the closest to your like Vlad, right? Your kind of OG Dracula, yeah.
Yes. And one thing you might or might not know about vampires is that they have familiars who go around, do their biddings, take care of their day-to-day life and all the boring administrative stuff that somebody as esteemed as Nandor the Relentless would not want to deal with. And in Nandor's case, his familiar is Guillermo. He occupies many roles over the course of the show: familiar, bodyguard, heart guard, vampire hunter, friend, sidekick, and almost lover. And that's what we're going to get into today. But before we dig into Nandermo, I think it's kind of fun to talk about the origins of What We Do in the Shadows, which I did not know when I started watching or when I first learned about it. It was based off a feature film. I think the show is way more successful at this point. Maybe?
Probably successful, but let people know about the film.
It's the most pirated film of 2014, so it was popular.
That adds up, because I was trying to remember when I watched it, and I'm pretty sure it was 2015 or 16. I think when I was in Georgia.
I did not see it until 2020 after I watched the first whatever seasons of the show. And it is
you have it in here that you remember when Laura told you about the show. I swear to God, I got to it first.
You told me about the show?
You just ignored me.
I probably did, because when Laura told me, I was like, I'm not fucking watching that. She was like, it's a show about vampires. And I'm like, this is the year 2020, or it was 2019, I think, of our Lord. I'm like, vampires are done. Like, the last time I took a vampire seriously, he had sparkly skin and my frontal lobe had not connected or whatever the hell it was supposed to be doing. I was a preteen and I was in love with a vampire. And after that, I can't take it seriously.
Yeah, you're just like, I've met Edward. I know what his deal is. Not scary anymore.
I
Way too
can't take
melodramatic.
it seriously, right? Yeah. I mean, has there ever been a scary vampire movie? Like, in hindsight, Interview with the Vampire, they're just annoying and insufferable and violent, right? Like, that's what I feel about vampires. And so Laura, the co-host of my other podcast, Impolite Society, and apparently Emily here, has told me to watch this, and both times I shrugged it off. Well, I guess I started watching it maybe during the pandemic, because who didn't have more free time at that time? And I am so glad I did. As I mentioned, I just rewatched the pilot today in preparation of the episode, and it is just chef's kiss, a masterpiece. How would you describe the comedy?
It's almost Office-like in like the real world, like ridiculousness of it, except they're vampires. So like, it's not real world. I guess it's vampires in the real world. Like, what would the minutia be? But also you have like Jackie Daytona, so it's also like kind of over the top. The Matt Berry stuff's the stuff that stuck with me.
Yeah, Matt Berry is hilarious, and he was like his best self. Well, I wouldn't want to say that, but he was thriving in this role as Laszlo. Yep. So these vampires are living in a den, right? But they're roommates. So in addition to Nandor and Guillermo living in the house in the earlier seasons, there are 3 more vampire roommates that include Nadja, who is some kind of Greek traveler person type culture. Then there's Laszlo, who is the English dandy. And then Colin Robinson, the energy vampire, they just tapped some kind of piece of our cultural zeitgeist so perfectly with him.
Yes, that's what
he's the standout. He's one of the standouts.
Colin Robinson was like a moment when this show started. Because it's just like, who hasn't met someone who's like...
who bores you to death and seems to feast off depleting your energy through conversation. It's just hilarious. And at this, the pacing and the timing, I want to say it's dry humor, but that might not be quite right. But it's very deadpan humor. They say hilarious stuff, but they just it's like throwaway. They just say it and then just look into the camera. Like The Office, right? I think that's a really good comparison.
Right. Because it's that mockumentary, which like kind of went out of fashion since The Office was kind of became its own thing. But then, and then Parks and Rec, and then everything else. I mean, even Abbott Elementary, what I referenced a while ago, is mockumentary style, and it's just, I think it's so overdone. But when it's a good show, I guess you don't even notice it. We're just so used to that being a style. But Laura told me it was a mockumentary style, and I was like, I'm not watching in 2019 a mockumentary. Yeah, you're like, that's corny. Vampires. I didn't realize that it was unserious. I feel like you guys did not get that across to me, that it was a not serious show. But yeah, it was so good. And it was also the inspiration of me buying the Vampires expansion pack for The Sims 4. I remember in 2020 being on my computer playing Sims Vampire with What We Do in the Shadows playing on a different screen. Good times. Take an inspiration. Yeah, it's just so good. And, you know, as anything that's good, it has its peaks and valleys, right? It starts really good, and then you can't quite recapture that magic, but you can't undo the magic either. And some of that magic is centered around the ship that we're focusing in on. And there was a lot going on there that captured the internet and the public's imagination. So Guillermo is Nandor's familiar. He is a human servant who helps him do all the mundane things. He cleans the house. He carries the bodies out. He makes sure sunlight doesn't get in. And he serves those in the house. And Guillermo, if you're going to summarize his personality, he's like a little puppy dog, right? He wants to please. He wants to win Nandor's approval. And most of all, he wants to be a vampire, at least at the beginning. Yes, so that's kind of right how he got into this. It was you do your service, you help out for so long, and then eventually Nandor would make him a full vampire. You would get the powers of the night. Which is something apparently he's dreamed about since he was a child, when he saw Antonio Banderas play a character in Interview with the Vampire. Yes. And that's when he realized that
Latinos can be vampires as well. That's just such a funny thing. And he's just a very earnest and enthusiastic.
He's just a cutie.
He
means well, and he's such a cutie. Yeah.
He wears like a little sweater vest and his glasses, and he is a little cutie. His boss is a cutie as well, but in a very different way. Nandor is a former warlord, warrior. He made the Euphrates run red with blood twice. They call him the Relentless because he never relented. He just never did. They said, oh, don't pillage us. But he did it anyway. And his personality, he is very self-aggrandizing, but sincere. When he cares about you, he really does. He's not a fake phony, like Soulless, apparently. But he's like a little vain and a little misguided, but he comes through when he needs to.
Yeah. Right, he means well. He's not quite in the real world, but like he'll make it work. He comes through.
And he'll talk a big game about how he's so much better than Guillermo. And like he makes the most ridiculous request of him or like says the most demeaning stuff, but he still also helps him when it matters because Nandor definitely had a soft spot for Guillermo over the progression of the show. Which I'm sure if I was just fresh in it, I have a lot more criticism for it. But looking back, I feel like they did a pretty good job of starting Guillermo as this huge people pleaser, like blubbering, doing anything Nandor wanted, to like giving him that arc where he got a lot more independence, got a lot more confidence, and broke out from being that support person to being able to focus and prioritize himself.
Yeah, so I haven't seen all of it, but I did get to the point where he becomes a vampire hunter. And there's obviously a dynamic there where as a human, right, you're prey to vampires, but then he becomes a hunter. So it's like, well, you know, he could fight them off if he really needed to.
And there's a scene where there's tension, but there's not a lot of like sexual tension. There's a lot more like, aw, tugging at your heartstrings, in my opinion on this one. But there is kind of a tense moment where Nandor did something to Guillermo and he ends up with a stake at his neck. Guillermo has a stake at his neck. And I'm like, okay, this is like the part that I feel a little bit of like it actually being more on the spicy side and not just on like the side.
This came up when I was doing research on Reddit. And like that's right, because as a Nandor, he's like, if I'm lying, kill me, you know? It's like, that's always going to be sexy.
Yeah.
It's like a trope for a reason.
Well, right. And it's just, and it's he's, you know, that earnest vulnerability. God, it always comes back to that. This wasn't meant to be a study on what makes things, you know, arousing, but I feel like it's going to be where we're just going to like, yep, that's what it is.
This is the dynamic.
This is the exact recipe. Now let us go out and write a bunch of, romantic books about hockey players and be very, very rich.
It's basically what it comes down to. You got to hit the points. The knife at the throat, that's definitely one of them. Shows up occasionally for no reason.
Yeah, and I mean, and the power shift is also a big part of that, like, empowerment for Guillermo, right?
Yeah.
Where he's just kicking vampire ass left and right. He kills countless vampires. And it starts with accidentally killing that big bad European vampire. And one of the kind of like more tender moments of that first season is when Guillermo admits to killing the Baron in front of the Vampiric Council and is about to face their wrath. And Nandor says, no, you can't. And like he steps in and thereby saves Guillermo, which is a theme throughout the show, is that Nandor does stand up to keep Guillermo alive when a lot of other masters, quote unquote, would just kind of be like, okay, whatever, you know. They don't view their familiars with a lot of esteem.
So whether or not it's romantic, there definitely is feelings going either way. They like each other. They're at least buddies.
There's affection, and that's demonstrated over and over again. And their relationship is so funny because a hallmark of it is somebody's always leaving and coming back, right? Guillermo's quitting and going off to do his own things. Just kidding, he's back. Nandor's going back to his homeland. Just kidding, he's back. You know, there's always that no matter what they do, they're just kind of pulled back together.
They kind of need each other. It's not maybe the best relationship.
Right.
Codependent, whether or not they're kissing.
Yes, definitely. The codependent is in there. But over the course, the canon relationship never quite crosses the finish line. And they end up, because the series just ended, is they end up becoming kind of like a crime-fighting superhero duo. And they don't actually get to be lovers in the night.
No, there's no official confirmation.
Which,
of their
obviously, if there was, we wouldn't be talking about it on the show.
No.
So
it wouldn't be on podcast.
That's what we like. We like couples who don't, because again, who likes happy endings? So, okay, we kind of jumped the gun. We're getting into the meat of it, but
Yeah.
we always like to talk about the couples. Meet cute or get the boot, which is what I remember instead of doing poop shoot. Just let us know. What do you like better? Get the boot or poop shoot? Because I lean towards poop shoot, but Emily likes get the boot. She's less vulgar. She's a less vulgar sister. Oh, but we forgot to add that too.
I know. That's the other thing we were supposed to write down in our script.
Surprise! We're blood related. So there you go, folks.
Yeah.
But meet cute or poop shoot. Get the boot. So this ended up being way more complicated than I thought, because the first thing I did was go on TikTok and looked up Nandermo edits. And I saw like this really touching scene of Guillermo interviewing for his job as familiar. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is an amazing meet cute, because Guillermo was talking about how much he wants to be a vampire, and Nandor's like, and like being really sweet about it. And it's like, I thought it was a nice moment, but I could not find any evidence of it on the internet. I was like Googling like crazy, like Guillermo interview, and I kept getting like real interviews with the actors. And I'm like, what is happening? And so then right before we jump on the call, I do a deeper dive and I pull up that TikTok again, that edit, and I'm reading the comments because somebody's going to ask, what episode is this? Somebody's going to answer it. God bless the internet. And sure enough, they did. And I found out it was in the last season, and it's not really the interview. It's actually even more touching, because in the episode, season 6, episode 3, everybody's hypnosing each other with the vampire hypnosis skills. It's something they do. And Guillermo gets super sleep hypnosis, so he forgets everything. I guess he's like gone back in time to before he had even met the vampires. He like forgets everything. And so he shows up, and Guillermo thinks he's meeting them all for the first time. Nandor knows everything, and he's getting to see fresh little Guillermo again in the moment. And that's when he was just like enjoying it. And like, that's why he was looking so intently at him, because obviously the relationship has grown over these 6 seasons, the 12 years that Guillermo was his familiar. And they have this relationship, and it's like he's getting the opportunity to go back to their first meeting and relive it, knowing everything he knows, like feeling everything he feels. And it was just so sweet. And he was just like, it's really tempting to keep him as he is right now, but I'm going to make him go back to who he was. And that's why, you know, the meet cute probably wasn't that cute, because Nandor was probably just like, oh God, who is this like insufferable little human? Like, he's going to make easy target to get to do what I want him to do.
Manipulate him for like 10 years or whatever.
Right? Well, yeah, I think by the 10 years he was invested, but
yeah,
like
he still wasn't going to make him a vampire though.
Oh yeah, he just made him a sparkle glitter portrait, which was hilarious. But the fact that they got to recreate it in a place where Nandor appreciated Guillermo and having that time with him was very sweet. And he let him sleep in his little cabinet under the stairs again. And yeah, he just let him enjoy that piece. So I thought that was a meet cute. Maybe it's just the fact that it was edited on TikTok with romantic music under it, that I thought it was more meaningful than it probably was. But I liked it. I thought, you know, as far as the meet cutes that we see on here, This is one of the better ones.
Yeah, this one's a meet cute. That we see, at least. This one.
At least the recreation
of the
of it.
previous one.
Because I thought it was a flashback. Forgetting the mockumentary format of the show and that it's impossible to have a flashback because the film crew wasn't there to have filmed it. I pieced it together eventually. And then I literally thought I was insane because like, I know I saw the video of something.
Like, where is it? It's out here.
What is the context? So that's why I had to go find it.
Well, I like the amnesia aspect. That's another kind of romance, like, trope. Falling in love again. Reminding you who you are, you know?
Right.
I don't know. Seem to be hidden. Couple
Hits all
of them.
the notes. And we'll get into that because it was all done purposefully. And that's what some of the commentary that fans have on the situation. Yeah. But outside of that very meet cute in the last season, they have a lot of other highlights, as we talked about. The power dynamic shift, servant to protector to like equal at the end. And so when we got into like the forums, right, the Reddit subreddit mostly, to look at why people were shipping them together, several moments kind of rose to the top. One of them that I thought I didn't catch on the first time through was when Nandor actually gets married to a former wife. Nandor had 37 wives at some point, and they all rode off into the night when he became a vampire or something like that. And he uses a genie, a djinn. Is that what they're called? A djinn? A
djinn.
Yeah. To resuscitate and bring back his favorite wife, Marwa. And he tries to remarry her again because I guess he's feeling lonely or whatnot. And I believe this is season 3 where they were the heaviest on hinting at Nandermo. I feel like this was the season where they like got really heavy on Nandermo for a few seasons, like teasing us, the viewer. But I think this was one of them. Because in this season, Nandor has cold feet about being married. You know, eternity is a long time. And he wants Marwa to be his perfect partner. And to do that, one of his wishes from the djinn is that she likes everything that he likes. And apparently, after that, Marwa does a 180 on her feelings about Guillermo and goes from like barely interacting with him to pulling him aside the night of the wedding and telling him how important he is to her, how much she loves him, how much he matters, and like giving him tons of physical affection. Which this one over my head. I thought this was like the friend who sets up their true love with somebody else and they have to sit there and like be bitter about it. You know, I can't think of the analogy, but I know that's a trope. You're like, I just want them to be happy, you know?
Yeah.
I thought it was something like that. But apparently it was her feelings had changed because she was now mirroring Nandor.
Right. So she can actually express the feelings Nandor has, but doesn't want to vocalize.
He can't quite act on. Yes, he can't kiss Guillermo on the face multiple times in quick succession. And Guillermo is probably still jealous in these bits too, which jealousy is another key theme that we see a lot on both sides when Guillermo defends Nandor's honor against, what is her name? He has a little girlfriend who's a werewolf or dates a werewolf. I can't remember.
I saw
but
Gale? Or is that the...
Gale, I think so. Yeah.
She's at the gym or something. I feel like I saw this season.
Oh, that's a different person. That's
okay.
He does have a Gale, and she goes off. She's kind of a hippie, right? Like loose cannon, free spirit about who she loves. So she leaves him for a werewolf, and that's when
liking the werewolves.
Yeah,
we're werewolves,
they're
not
always...
swearwolves.
That's from the movie.
That's from the movie.
I think they might make a reference to that at some point. But yeah, the werewolves are funny. But that's one instance. And then it goes the other way when Guillermo gets a boyfriend because Guillermo is canonically gay and Nandor sabotages their date. I believe I read online, I can't remember exactly the reference, but Nandor is supposedly pansexual. That might just be an extrapolation from the fact that all the vampires have sex with each other all the time.
Pretty sure everybody, right, in this TV show basically
Is pansexual, right?
Yeah, they're all pansexual. Everybody's sleeping with everybody.
Nandor is like
Guillermo.
the least sexual of the vampires, though. He's like the most awkward. And he's also awkward when he tries to woo the woman at the gym, which this is another big piece of the Nandermo baiting, dare I say, that happens in the show, is that Guillermo gets transformed into Nandor's likeness to woo this woman, because apparently Nandor can't do it well himself. So he sends Guillermo in looking like him, and they go on this date, and somehow the topic of Guillermo comes up, and Guillermo, as Nandor, is talking about himself, and the way that he talks about himself and their relationship to this woman shifts it entirely from a date to like gal pals, because she starts telling him, oh, you need to like, oh, just like get drinks with him and tell him how you feel, and maybe he feels the same way. And Guillermo as Nandor was like, no, it's not like that. And she was like, no, give it a shot. So she was obviously picking up on his feelings and then like trying to tell them to go for it, which that was like, I think some of the peak hinting at it from the writers.
Yeah, having the viewers in the show saying, like, we see you. We see what's happening here. We're acknowledging it.
Right, and we'll get into in a second. And I'm sure there's so many more moments that we're missing, right? But those I feel like are kind of the highlight turning points.
It seems to be a lot of kind of jealousy when one or the other kind of maybe finds a person to like step in between the relationship. Kind of seems to be that's when you really see their feelings for each other.
Right, which that goes back to that codependency you were saying, which I guess doesn't necessarily have to be romantic, but for whatever reason reads romantic.
Yes.
And one of the things that they called out online too with Marwa on the wedding night, the Baron asked if Nandor was going to transform her into a vampire, and he said no. He was like, well, we'll see what happens. But later, he was getting closer to transforming Guillermo. Like, he says at some point, if they go to his old homeland, he will transform him there. So people took that as evidence of him being more invested in Guillermo long term. Some also would say that he never wanted to change Guillermo into a vampire because he didn't want to lose him, right? So having Guillermo as his familiar meant that Guillermo was dependent on him to have access to the vampire world and was always going to be continually with them. And if he made him a vampire, he could then go his own way, right? And forge his own way. So by limiting him in that capacity, he was keeping him there.
It would be a change in their dynamic. They'd be a more equal footing. And then maybe Guillermo would choose to leave.
Right. Which isn't necessarily a good thing either. Back to that codependency. Right? He's limiting him to keep him in his life. Not great. Oh, and another really big thing that people talk about, speaking of becoming a vampire, is Guillermo does become a vampire at some point without Nandor's services. And then Nandor helps him transform back into a human, like as an act of compassion, because he knows that Guillermo doesn't have what it takes. He's not the heartless killer that Nandor the Relentless is. And that's kind of a touching thing too. He has some touching confessionals in the mockumentary style. So obviously this gives us a lot to react to, and gives the fandom a lot to react to. And looking back, the fandom is kind of the ones who are shaping some of this, in my opinion. Because they wrote these initial episodes, fans picked up on this dynamic that maybe wasn't intentional. And so then the creators of the show embraced it and started sprinkling those little Easter eggs in there just to keep people excited.
So maybe they didn't mean to, but like I said, I kind of stopped watching. I fell off. But just from like the zeitgeist, I basically thought it was a done deal. Like it had reached a point where I was like, yeah, they're going to get together. These writers seem to be leaning into it. Everything I'm seeing seems to be like they're going to be a couple, including an article on Vulture where the writer called them potentially the greatest love story in modern television.
And it's amazing because this was something that wasn't created by the fans. The spark wasn't lit by the fans, but it was nurtured. And the writers embraced it. And you can see that tone shift as the seasons went on. You have those moments with the gym girl and like the jealousy, only for it to be completely walked back in the last season, leaving fans confused and a little mad at times.
Well, I think they even had like the writers and the actors kind of almost, they're never going to commit, but they called it like a slow burn or a will they won't they. Like they wouldn't commit, but they wouldn't deny either. Apparently the Guillermo's actor would post on his like personal accounts like ship stuff.
Right.
Like
he would
fan
post
art.
fan art.
Yeah. Most of the critiques I could see of it were either people who just weren't feeling it. They're just like, they're buddies, they're friends. I don't know. They don't need to be romantic. But also just critiques of like, what happened? Where'd it go?
Yeah. Why did you push it and then it just completely fall off?
Yeah. And not address it either way. Not even address it like, oh, they get together, or just address it as like, yeah, Guillermo had feelings. He did have a crush on him, but now he's moved past that as a part of his growing arc.
Right. Or the fact that Nandor maybe got confused, like he needed something in that moment of having that consistency, that support, that person who cared for and helped him. And because he applied that, he projected that onto Guillermo in a way that mimicked romantic feelings, But I had the same thought. And then I thought, not everything has to be so neat, right? Mm-hmm. How many of us have perfect closure of every crush we've ever had? Like, people don't even get that with relationships, like that sit down and be like, I liked you, but like life, blah, 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 blah. I mean, to be fair, that kind of mimics real life, where it's just like feelings come, feelings go. Sometimes they're more strong than others. And sometimes you just never really ever connect on whether they happened or not.
Yeah, they don't line up, maybe.
In life, it's very unsatisfying. It's TV. TV should be more satisfying. I wish they had talked about it.
Yeah,
like,
that was kind of
the finale.
I got was like, it's like you were clearly leaning into it. Why not address it at all in any way, like any capacity?
Right. And that's what brings up the questions around the big Q word, right? Queer baiting. That people are saying this online, that they thought that they were leaning into it to build the hype, to build the buzz, but still were afraid to take the plunge into it. Which I also saw a quote that said, I've never been so queer baited by an actual queer character.
I saw some stuff that was like, is it queer baiting if they are queer? I mean, so, or is it ship baiting? Because a lot of the queer baiting stuff is like, oh, no homo, So
they really weren't, and they don't like men or whatever.
Yeah. Although it is funny, we're talking about this today. Today I saw a post, I think on Tumblr, that was like, what we do with the shadows. Up there was Supernatural on like confirming your number one ship in the most non-committal and confusing way possible.
Right.
It's up to interpretation, kind of.
But then the writers gave you a big slap on the face with it, right? Because they teased it so much, walked it back, and then in the finale, when Nadja is hypnotizing the audience of this mockumentary to visualize whatever ending that they think is the most satisfying, the ending for our fantasy sequence is Nandor waking up in bed with Guillermo and doing that whole old sitcom bit of like, wow, that was all a dream. That was a weird dream I had. And they're obviously a couple. I think Guillermo kisses Nandor, and it's very obviously that they're a couple. They're kind of like, haha, we know you guys want to see this, but you're not going to get it.
It's like almost worse. Like acknowledging
it was almost worse.
Yeah.
I thought they should have just cut it after that, but they didn't. This weird superhero thing that they like leaned into in the last couple episodes. And Nandor has a crush on the guide? What? Where did that come from?
Right, because she's been around. Like, Kristen Schaal, always great. But
always great.
Yeah. Well, because she reads him, right? She kind of tells him the truth. You're interested in the pursuit, but not the actual relationship.
Yeah. She like hits it right on the head. But he would never like pursued Guillermo. Maybe he didn't have to, and that's part of the issue. Or like the kind of the disconnect is he never had to chase and like win him over. He always was fawning over him from the get-go. So I don't know. I'm not going to get in here and try to diagnose fictional relationships, though, because I will always fail at that. But again, when we look at the fandom and what they were going to have to say, there's, of course, people who ship them. I mean, I'm not the most romantically inclined, and I picked up on the chemistry and what was happening before they got really heavy-handed with it. But then there's other people who are posting on Reddit being like, I don't get where any of this is coming from.
Which is like, I wasn't even watching it and I knew it was like a thing. Like,
Yeah.
So clearly they crossed that barrier.
Right. Will be interesting because I feel like I'm going to have thoughts around this when we get to the next couple or, I don't know, couples down, whatever. There's a couple we've talked about doing that we're going to do after we actually consume the content that it's just kind of this question of like, especially when it comes to same-sex relationships, is like, is everybody's potential romantic partner? Like, that just seems exhausting.
Especially when it's two like men, because that's also like a dynamic that's not really explored. Just being friends.
Right. Like, yeah, can't there be some wholesome platonic relationships, right? Is the end game for every intimate relationship romance and sex? Like, I think, as like you said, there's not a lot of really good portrayals of men friendships. So did they have to lean into it if that wasn't their end goal or their intention?
Right. Yeah, because that's something else. Why'd they lean into it? So, yeah, just for views?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah,
I think
for
I
sure.
saw one of the writers also wrote for Frasier. And apparently the whole thing with Frasier was the Niles Daphne story arc was will they, won't they, until everybody's tired of it. And then do it a little bit more because it just keeps people coming back.
Oh, God.
So we've all been played, essentially, with this couple.
Oh, and it's not the first time. And yeah.
It won't be the last.
It is just funny because I know, this gets a lot in the Reddit compared to Our Flag Means Death, right? Similar, the same creator. Whereas that one doesn't seem to have this. That one, they just go for it.
Oh,
So,
nice.
but maybe it's newer. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think, yeah. And was this on network or was this on a cable station? I can't
I feel like
remember.
it was. And I feel like I watched it week by week. So it probably wasn't on. I watched it on Hulu, but I think, it was released.
On maybe on FX or was it on Fox? I can't remember. So that's going to make a big difference too on who is going to be the end consumer. But again, while we're talking about criticisms, I think one of the ones that is 100% fair that I stand by is that Guillermo being a gay man on such a big show, like they could have given him more opportunities to explore romantic interests outside of Nandor. If they weren't going to put them together, they could have at least had him dating more or finding a partner as a part of that character growth and independence that he's gaining. Like maybe at the end, he has somebody, and instead of having that big heart-to-heart conversation of like, oh, time and place or whatever, they could have got that message across with Guillermo like drawing a boundary of some kind with Nandor. And I think the fans would have liked that, being like, I know Emily's cat's trying to get involved on the episode. She's got thoughts.
Like you could have his crush on Nandor on the beginning, and maybe that's because he wanted to be a vampire so bad. Like, it's almost his feelings for Nandor maybe represent this like want to be a vampire, and then he kind of sees he gets his own power. They represent moving on from that, accepting who he is, his personal growth, with maybe moving on from his feelings. And also for a show where everyone's poly or pan or whatever, all the major relationships are straight.
Yeah.
Like they could have used, some more representation in there. Yeah. Especially if you're going to claim to be a queer TV show.
Right. And it was embraced by the queer community so much too. Mm-hmm. It's just disappointing. I was even criticism what I was saying of like, who gets to have these big heart-to-heart conversations and closure? They had an easy workaround. It's a mockumentary. They could have had him deliver what we want him to say straight down the camera. right? Or they could have had him have a conversation with anybody, his new partner, any of the other vampires. The fucking doll, animated doll that is hanging out with them. They had so many opportunities to kind of be like, yeah, we fucked with y'all for 6 seasons, but at least we're going to give you this. And they chose to do a weird dream sequence instead. Yeah.
And a superhero side plot that
just came in the last
Weird.
2 episodes. Again, it's a really good show, and I know there's a lot of criticism of how it ended, but how
Endings
can you
are
end a
hard.
show? Yeah, endings are hard. Like, how many things have really good endings? So many things have really good starts and premises, but the last quarter, or like 3/3 of a book's stories, movies are never good.
Yeah. It's easy to come up with the premise, and then it's kind of hard to maintain it. You kind of have to, overdo yourself or, work on top of it.
Yep. And that's what, like, Stephen King, every book of his starts so good, and the world he builds, and then the ending just flies off the rail. Why did that hand of God come down and set off a nuclear bomb? That was so weird. Made those people walk
He's
over
like,
the
I'm out of
mountains.
pages. I gotta
He's
stop
like,
myself.
I gotta, yeah, well, and,
My publisher's on my ass.
yeah, he's like, we literally cannot print the amount that we would have to charge to sell a book that has this many pages would make this book cost us money to sell. So wrap it up. Just like we need to wrap this podcast up.
Yeah, I know.
I'm looking at the time. Okay. So that comes down to it. I think we really covered a lot of the discourse around it though, which is good. And that kind of leaves us in the final place where we get to share our thoughts. Emily, what is your true pairing score on Nandermo?
So I think this is one of my more negative ones. I don't know if I ship it just because honestly, I think Guillermo can do better.
Yeah, he
like-
deserves better.
Yeah, so I'm going to give it a 2 mosquitoes out of 10.
Yeah, because they're bloodsuckers.
Right? That's what
Right.
he was the vampire hunter, right?
Oh, yeah. When he joined the club. That was horrible. They go in that house and that guy dies. And it's his van. His mom's van.
That was
Some dark moments.
from when I was still watching.
But then he
I
comes
remember
back and he's a vampire. And he's the one who turns Guillermo.
Okay.
Unsuccessfully.
Yeah, I didn't know he ever became a vampire. I just assumed he never did. Didn't know he did and then took it back.
Yeah, there was problems with it. I can't remember. That's the season that lost me. But I hear it was really romantic at the end. That's fair. And you're not going to like this score, but I will have to context it as well. Because I'm going to give it 10 out of 10 LARPing virgins. But that's because I consider them to be what is not fated mates, but they were needed to be in each other's lives to grow and change as people, but they should not be together. So 10 out of 10, we love to watch this relationship grow and change over the course of the show. But I agree, 2 or 3 for are they meant to be together? They're
You
a
just like them
friend.
together, but not
Yes,
together.
yeah. Because the moments they had and all those things are great and they both helped each other grow so much. But yeah, I don't ship them either. It was an unsatisfying ending, but if they ended up together, that would have been equally as unsatisfying. We would have been okay, yay, we saw it, but what's that going to look long term down the road?
Yeah, is it sustainable? Are they not just gonna
Right.
break up in a little bit or just make each other's lives worse?
Right. And I think because we probably read more and belabored this in conversation more than most average viewers. I'm going to say the best ending for these two would have been some kind of heart to heart about what had happened and the feelings that did exist and acknowledging them, why they wouldn't work, and moving forward in a way where they can be in each other's lives in a positive way.
Right. Just a kind of a commit to the friendship.
Right. We know that it was a almost would they, won't they, but this is how we're best. Mm-hmm. And we're better for it.
Can grow as people. We'll have each other's backs.
But that's boring. Real life growth, healthiness, boo. No, just kidding. And if you're wanting to hear more, then stick with us. Be sure to give us a rating or review. And of course, share Ship Happens with the shippers in your life. If you know anybody who likes what you do in the shadows and wants to hear people have deep conversations about it, send us their way.
So if you want to share your thoughts with us or let us know about any maybe particularly maybe spicy or romantic moments you missed, you just totally disagree, you think they should be together forever, you can text us at the number in the description below.
Yeah, so in the show notes, there's a link. Click it. It sends it directly to us. Mm-hmm. We want to know your thoughts.
Or if you have any ideas, any new ships that we should talk about,
let us know. We do a lot of searching around, but we are not cool, so we don't know the hot new ships. So let us know.
We try to talk about what's topical, but it's going to, episode's going to release in 6 months, so who knows?
Well, that's if they ever release at all. Just kidding. We'll get there. But yeah, send us your ships. We'll look into them. We'll talk about them if you want to hear our thoughts. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new ship to talk about. But until we see you again, remember,
ship happens!